everyone. Welcome to the new podcast. It's going to be called Just Stuff, presented by Sports and Stuff. I'm one of your hosts, Jordan Mapes. I have my good buddy,
Sebastian Andrukovic. And how y'all doing? I guess let's get right into it. This podcast, it is new, and a lot of people who are new to SNS. We do have a lot of other podcasts, as well as Beyond the Paddock, the Damn podcast as well. And this podcast is just going to be about literally anything we want it to be. So we're going to have a multitude of different topics to go over. It could be F1 related. It could be SNS related. It could be even any other things related. It's literally a format for us to talk about whatever we want to talk about. Today we are talking about F1 with the F1 season starting up, and we have the season predictions going on today. So we're going to just quickly go over that, and that's going to be the podcast for the day.
And I'm actually very excited for this because I know with the way we've been talking recently, I don't think they're going to be that similar. I think we have especially a few drivers on the grid in particular where we're going to have different places. So I'm looking forward to this, actually.
Oh, yeah. I have some controversial opinions throughout, so it'll get very interesting later on.
You want me to go ahead and start?
Yeah, let's start with so I will explain very quickly. Both of us included where we predict Franco Colapinto with just the rumors that are going on with the grid. We did add 21, but we did give it the option where if we feel like Franco Colapinto will not be joining the grid, you can put him in as a non-contest and put him just down into P21. So firstly, I'll let Jordan pick the start at 21.
Yep, and speaking of Colapinto, I think you and I have different opinions on this, but I don't think Colapinto will have that many starts. He might come in late in the season, but I don't think he's going to come in as early as you think, so he is 21 for me.
Okay. I mean, I don't hate it. My thing is putting Colapinto 21, even if he gets a couple starts in that Alpine, that Alpine's quicker than a couple other cars. I'm sure, like, in 4 races, he'll get a couple points, which could be enough to propel him ahead of some of the drivers I have in the back of my grid. But I'll quickly go into, well, why do you have, I guess you explained it enough, but do you really think he's not going to get any points, or?
I think if they do bring him in, it'll be late in the season. I know there's rumors that, some people don't like the other people in Alpine and that they might make that move quickly, but I think he will come in late enough in the season to where if he does get those starts, I don't think that he'll get enough starts to get a point or two and move up the grid. And I could be wrong. He could come in late in the season and excel, but he's going to be 21 for me for sure.
Okay, for sure. And I'll just, since we're going into 20 as well, I'm just going to go straight with my 21 and 20 because they kind of go hand in hand. I have Nico Hülkenberg in 21, and I have Gabriel Bortoleto in 20. So I think both are fantastic drivers, honestly. I'm really high on Gabriel Bortoleto. I think he's going to have a few great performances. I could see him get a point, possibly in a Grand Prix or 2 or something like that. So I do think he'll take it above Hülkenberg just a little bit, especially with all the rookies on the grid. I think the rookies are going to want to make a name for themselves. So that's why I have Bortoleto ahead of Hülkenberg.
So we're definitely in the same boat because my P20 is Hülkenberg and my P19 is Bortoleto. I have no faith in that car whatsoever. That car is going to be the worst car again. Obviously, at this point, it looks worse than it did last year. I don't even know how that's possible, but I don't expect them to be anywhere near scratching the top 10 this season unless it's super late in the season. I just don't have faith in that car.
Yeah, for sure. For me, P19, again, talking about Alpine, the whole moving that possibly could go around, I do think this guy is going to get a couple points with his time in Alpine. I just don't think it's going to be a long time. I went the other way around, and I went Jack Doohan. I think there's no way you're signing Colapinto for 5 seasons if you don't plan on driving this guy. They're going to fulfill what they need to fulfill with Jack Doohan's contract, and they're going to kick him to the curb, even if he gets a couple good performances in, which does suck.
Well, Doohan isn't quite that low for me, but he's not too far off. But for 18, I actually have Ocon.
Okay, interesting. So why do you think Ocon at 18?
I'm still not super confident in that car. I mean, I could see Haas being better laid down in the season, but I do have them as the second worst car on the grid in my opinion. I was just more impressed by some of the other practice performances on some of the other cars. And honestly, I think Behrman's going to overperform compared to Ocon, so I do think Behrman's going to be up there, but I do have them as the second worst car in the grid.
Oh, for sure. I could see the thought there. I mean, I'm not as low on the Haas. I don't think the Haas is going to be too great. We'll get to that in a bit. But for me, P18, I got Isaac Hadjar. The way you feel about the Haas, I feel about the V carb. But I've talked about this with you specifically. I'm not the craziest fan of Isaac Hadjar. I do think he is going to be an F1 bust, and I really think there's a possibility we only see him in the grid for one season. I just don't see anything special in him personally.
That makes sense. P17, this is where I have Doohan. I'm not sold on Doohan. I don't think he's going to do well this season. I do think they're going to stick with him out longer than just the minimal on his contract and get rid of him. I do think, especially if he has one good start or two, they might stick with him and just get Colapinto ready for the 2026 season. That's still my thought process on it, but that's why I have him at 17.
Okay. Interesting. So I haven't even gotten to Colapinto yet, and I will not be getting there at this one. In P17, I chose horrible talent. I'm going Lance Stroll. I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure ever since, I think it was like Spa, he's gotten 0 points. And it's like, I get that the Aston Martin has been horrible, but Fernando Alonso has gotten all of Aston Martin's points since then. Yep. Even if that car picks it up, he's not going to do much. He might get 10 points or something like that if the Aston Martin starts to get faster towards the end of the season. But it's not looking good right now, and I don't think they're going to do much. But I'll go into 16 right now because we have talked about it a couple times. This is where I have Franco Colapinto. So, again, I do think Doohan is going to be out early, and I think Colapinto is a good enough driver. I think he actually has potential to be something fantastic, and I think that Alpine has the chance to deliver on a great performance here and there. So even with the drivers before him probably racing the entire season, I still think Colapinto is going to finish ahead of him.
That makes sense. We'll go in the 16 and 15 for me. I have Bierman at 16. I do think he's going to overperform Ocon, but like I said, I still don't have the confidence in that Haas. I do think the V-Carb is personally going to be better. And then we already spoke on this guy, but P15 I have Stroll. I do think the Aston Martin might pick up later in the season, especially with who they picked up. We all know him, but I have no faith in Stroll. Like you said, he hasn't had a point in a while. Alonso's been, carrying that team for some time, and I think it will continue. I don't see any signs that Stroll's going to improve this season.
Okay, I don't hate it. In P15, I went with the same mindset of you with Haas being bad, and I'm continuing on with V-Carb being bad. And I'm going with Tsunoda. So I still haven't gotten to any of those Haas drivers. I'm actually very high on Bierman personally. I do think he might look like the best rookie on the grid this season comparative to car performance. But Yuki Tsunoda, I do think he's a great driver. I just think that V-Carb's going to struggle to get points this season. I do really think that car, especially going into the end of the season, they were struggling to find their way to the top 10. Liam Lawson had a couple of all right enough performances where in Texas he is able to get points. Tsunoda, again, he has that moment here and there where he's doing something insane and he might even still get a P7, but I do think it's going to be hard to get some points for that car.
That makes sense.
Right.
That makes sense. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like we should do a quick refresher now that we're kind of a third into the list, so we can kind of individually go over each other's lists and talk about, just so to keep people up to date. So I could start ahead at this point, and then we'll go on to you starting from 21. So
Okay.
At 21, I have Hulkenberg, I have Bortoleto in 20, I have Doohan in 19, I have Hadjar in 18, I have Stroll in 17, Colapinto 16, and Tsunoda 15.
And then I have 21 Colapinto, 20 Hulkenberg, Bortoleto 19, Ocon 18, Doohan 17, 16 Bierman, and 15 Stroll. And we were pretty on the same page for the majority of it. I know we have the V-Carbs and the Haas flipped, but I mean, outside of that, we know who the backmarkers are going to be this season. It's pretty obvious. Obviously, the top 4 cars we haven't named off, and we're not going to name off until probably the top 8. So.
Yeah, and I think this part will actually get very interesting as well, because again, we're talking about who's going to be the king of the midfield. And some of these drivers, like I think it could be anyone's game. This is where I really struggle to pick up personally.
Well,
But I'll let you go into your 14.
all right, 14. I have Hadjar.
Okay.
Obviously, I don't think he's gonna perform better than Tsunoda. I'm not too high up on the V carb. I do think they're gonna be better than Haas, but I think Hadjar's gonna struggle to, find the way to get into the points. I'm not really sold on Hadjar either. I feel like he'd probably be a one and done on the grid as well. So I'm in agreement on that. I just think that personally the V carb is gonna do better than Haas.
All right, all right. Well, again, we're kind of keeping the same trend where we're just flipping the Haas and we're flipping the V carb because in P14 I have Esteban Ocon. And same scenario, I've already talked about Behrman. I do think he's going to be a fantastic driver. I actually still think Ocon will be a great driver, but I just have him behind Behrman. And then leading that into my 13, I do have Behrman, which again, I think that Haas, both drivers are going to perform relatively equally, where I think Behrman will get the edge on Ocon just a little bit. Again, both great drivers, but that Haas didn't look fantastic in preseason testing. Some other cars looked a little better, so that's where I'm sticking with.
Well, rolling into my 13, I got Fernando Alonso. I still see him improving late in the season. I do see him starting to pick up points. I don't have any faith in that car first half of the season. They have a lot of work to do before it's back up to being a mid or top marker again. They struggled tremendously end of last season. I mean, just getting knocked out in Q1 almost every single race. It was not good, and I didn't see enough improvement on the car to have faith that they're going to be in the top 10. So that's why I have Alonso at 13.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, Adrian Newey, going into Australia, he's only going to be there for 7 days, and his focus isn't even this season. Mm-hmm. So they're only going to put so much into this season. I have Alonso at P12, so we're kind of in the same range. I don't think he's going to top the midfield like he did last season, but I just don't think that car is going to be up to speed. I mean, again, I think he's going to vastly outperform Stroll, still be a fantastic driver, but that Aston Martin was looking like the second worst car of the grid last season. And if that's the case again, he'll still score points.
Yeah,
he just won't be able to get in the top 10, I think.
Of course. Rolling into my P12, I have Albon. Starting to get to some of those midfield packs. Obviously, I have faith in what Sainz is doing. I do think they'll improve throughout the season, of course. Albon, of course, I still think he's going to struggle to get into points, especially first half of the season. We'll see what Sainz can do to help him out, but right now I have Albon at 12.
For sure, for sure. I think that's hilarious the way you say it, like how Sainz could help him out. Like Albon is a big problem over there in Williams, but I'm still a little higher on Albon as a driver than I feel a lot of people are. I think a lot of people have tainted their opinion on Albon towards the end of the season, just with how Colapinto was performing. But yeah. Albon was a little more consistent. Colapinto just showed the pace. He could outpace Albon, which is a thing. Albon needs to work on the pace a little bit. But, I mean, he is a relatively consistent driver who was driving a crash-heavy car last season. I have Albon in P11, so I'm not too far off. Same mindset. I know you think Tsunoda is a little higher because that's the only name you haven't mentioned yet that I already mentioned. But, again, I'm very, very same mindset with Albon. I think the Williams is going to be a lot better than last season. I still think it's going to have its troubles, but Albon is a solid enough driver to where I think he'll just edge out Fernando Alonso.
Well, speaking of Yuki Tsunoda, he is my P11. I think he's going to overperform for what the car is. I think he has a lot to prove this season with, Lawson kind of jumping ahead of him. And this is really the season he needs to show up. And I think he's going to do his absolute best to overperform in the car that he's in. He's going to score points consistently. It sucks having Lawson jump ahead of him. I did fully expect to see him in the Red Bull. But I have a lot of faith in him, and I have a lot of faith that he's going to, do the best that he can in that car.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting. So everyone from P11 to P21, both of us have mentioned. So our top 10 is the exact same, but very likely in a different order. And from how we talked going into the season, I am very sure that it is in a different order, to say the least. But I'll go right into my P10, and he was exact same position last season as well. I think he's going to continue doing the same things. I think there's a potential he could get a podium in him this season. I got Pierre Gasly. Of course, Pierre Gasly, when he's in his prime, he's like Michael Jordan on the court. This guy's doing everything on that track. I don't know where it comes from, but Pierre Gasly in those one or two races every season, he is disgusting. So, I mean, all it's going to take is a couple races just to put him ahead of Albon with how he performs. He's still going to consistently get points, I'm sure, especially with how his pace was looking at the end of the season. Alpine has a great aerodynamicist over there, so that's going to help as well, even though their engine sucks. Yeah. But I do think some of those drivers ahead, it is going to be difficult for him to beat the next driver I have in the midfield position area. But those cars ahead, he's not catching them. So P10 is a good spot for a Gasly, but I think that's where he's going to be staying at.
Well, I 100% agree with everything you said to a T, and Pierre Gasly is also my number 10.
Okay, for sure.
We'll just roll right into number 9. I have Liam Lawson. The way Max Verstappen talked about not being able to compete for a podium in Australia has me worried about this Red Bull. It really does. And I think Max is going to have no problem staying at the top of the grid. I have absolute faith in Lawson as a driver. I think he's going to be in F1 for years to come. I don't have faith in the Red Bull as much. They lost some key pieces. Obviously, the car is being reported to not be as fast as some of the other tops on the grid, and I think he'll struggle to stay in that top 5, top 6 consistently. He's going to have some bad races, and that's why I have him at number 9.
I kind of chuckled a little bit because I do think that this is where we were really going to divert. But I also have Liam Lawson at P9 for the exact same reason. I do genuinely think that we haven't mentioned him. We know he's going to be ahead in a car that is worse than the top 4 cars. Carlos Sainz is the only driver both of us haven't mentioned that is in those slower cars. And I don't think it'll be Liam Lawson's fault. I think they're going to give all the points to Max Verstappen. He's definitely going to figure it out. He's going to be at the top, whatever. But even with that, Liam Lawson's still going to struggle. And P9's still a solid position.
Yeah,
it's just
absolutely.
It's going to be hard to fight for points in that Red Bull, I believe. All right, so in P8 now, I'm finally going to mention his name. It's Carlos Sainz. I think Carlos Sainz is an outstanding driver. For him to be in P8 in a Williams already in itself, it sounds outrageous, but I do think it's possible. And I think with how Williams was looking in preseason testing, just kind of the pace of how Carlos Sainz has been looking in preseason testing, he's been outstanding. So even if that car isn't even the 5th, 6th, like if it's the 6th best car, I still think Carlos Sainz is going to put outstanding performances. And there's a lot to be said with how he does the setups. He's very setup oriented, and even with the slower car again, he can still get the right setups to at least get the most out of that car.
Absolutely. And I know you expect us to start veering off, but we're not yet, because I also have Carlos Sainz at P8 for everything that you just mentioned.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, and I do think the next couple will start to get closer together until we get our top picks in. I think our top is where it's really going to veer off. Hopefully, I don't know, because we've been pretty on point with the same opinions, apparently.
There's one team that I know you and I are going to differentiate. I know that's where it's going to screw this all up, but we'll get to that in a moment. P7, I have Mercedes rookie Kimi.
Okay.
He's going to be coming in. Obviously, he's one of my favorite rookies coming in onto the grid. I think he's going to perform fantastic. I think he's going to consistently get points every single race. He might have one where he drops off here and there. All rookies have them. I don't see Mercedes keeping the same pace as Ferrari and McLaren through the entire season. I think there's going to be some races where they're just going to struggle in and not get as many points. And I don't think that Kimi is going to perform as well as Russell in those races. So that's why I have him at P7.
Okay, sweet. For the exact same reasons, I have Kimi Antonelli in P7 as well. I thought it was pretty obvious, if I'm being honest, this one. I had a feeling you were going to say P7 for Kimi as well. We know that the Mercedes is one of the better cars in the grid, but not the best. I don't think he's going to outperform George Russell with how good George Russell really has been at the end of last season. And I don't think people have really been talking about that enough, considering that the McLaren and the Ferrari were clearly the best cars, and he was still coming in getting pole positions in Qatar. Granted, the
Yeah,
pole position was by a penalty, but still, the person who got penalized was Max Verstappen, so it wasn't even a McLaren or a Ferrari. So, but anyway, I do think Antonelli has the potential to win a race this season. I think it's very plausible, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen. But he will have probably some inconsistencies. I do think he's going to crash, but those great performances is definitely why I'll still be up to P7. And then
absolutely.
for the exact same reasons and why I talked about it, even though I did say that he's not talked about as much, I still do have George Russell in P6. Again, a Mercedes still isn't as fast as the other cars. He's not as good as Max Verstappen. So, it's a great spot for him. He'll probably win multiple Grand Prix, honestly. I can see him winning 2, 3, even like last season. But again, there's going to be the inconsistency that Mercedes has. There's still the issues that they talk about with the wing and itself and how they don't understand their tire wear. So that'll be something that definitely comes up. But we'll see what happens as time goes on.
Yeah, so far we're in the exact same boat. I also have George Russell at P6. Obviously, I think he's going to perform better than Kimi, but I don't think that they're going to keep that same pace as Verstappen or the McLarens or the Ferraris. I think that as the season progresses, we'll see that those two teams in particular are just going to be one step ahead of Mercedes. Like I said, I could very well see, Russell winning 2 races, Kimi winning a race even, but as the season goes on, I don't think they're going to keep that pace for the full season.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, this is where I know we're going to differentiate. If you have this person on P5, I'll be very surprised. But I have Oscar Piastri at P5. We know the talent from the other 4 drivers. Obviously, the McLaren's being reported to be the fastest car in the grid. You and I have talked all of last season about our differences and how we feel Piastri is. Obviously, Piastri is a great driver. Can he keep it up consistently for a full season and keep racking up the points and the podiums? I don't foresee that. I still feel like he's going to make a couple mistakes here and there. They're going to drop him out of a 3rd place to a 4th, little things like that. And we all know how fast Max Verstappen is. We all know how good the Ferraris are. And we all know how good Lando Norris is in that McLaren. So that's why I've got to put Piastri at P5.
Some people are going to hate you for saying how good Lando Norris is, but I do agree, underappreciated. He's still finished P2 in the standings last season. But anyway, to divert, I do disagree on Oscar Piastri. I don't have Oscar Piastri in my P5. I think he's going to really, again, take that next step, especially when McLaren start likely treating both of their drivers as number 1 drivers again, because we obviously know towards the end of the season, focus was on Lando Norris last season. So we'll see what happens as it goes along. Oscar Piastri did show stints where he was better than Lando Norris at times. So I don't think it's that out of the realm to think he could be better than Lando Norris in any given season at this point. My P5, though, I'm going the opposite direction. I'm going Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari. So I've talked about it with many people. I do think Lewis Hamilton is going to be the worst of the 2 drivers. I think Charles Leclerc is outstanding in every level of the game when it comes to tire wear, when it comes to qualifying. And qualifying is a big spot where Lewis Hamilton has really lacked recently. God, I can't speak. but he really has been lacking in qualifying. And even if he could put outstanding races together, if you're consistently going behind in qualifying, those other 4 drivers are going to take advantage of it and go ahead of him. And I do think the Ferrari is going to be the slower out of that car and the McLaren. And again, Max Verstappen's Max Verstappen. So,
before I even started saying P5, I knew that's where you were going to have him. Obviously, we've talked about this before. You obviously know my thoughts on Lewis Hamilton. That's why, as we go into P4, I have Charles Leclerc. It's big talk about which one of these guys are going to be the driver 1 this season. Obviously, we all know Ferrari at some point in the season is going to name one of them driver 1. They do it every single year, regardless of who was on the team. But I genuinely feel that this change of scenery is going to be great for Lewis. I feel like the qualifying, mishaps he had last season, I feel like he's going to get it figured out. I feel like he's going to qualify well consistently. I feel like the Ferrari is going to be better than that Mercedes last season. I have all the faith in the world that this Ferrari is going to compete. Maybe not to the same level as McLaren, but I feel like with the way this car is set up, that Hamilton's going to excel in it. And nothing against Charles Leclerc. Like, you look at the grid now, I still consider him the third best driver on the grid. I think he's going to be right up there with him. I feel like it's neck and neck between those two, honestly. But if I had to tip my hat to one way or the other, I'm going to give it to Lewis Hamilton. That's why I have Leclerc number 4.
Okay. Interesting. So for me, for different reasons, I have Leclerc at number 4 because I do think he's going to be the better Ferrari driver in this case, Mo. Again, I just think the McLaren's going to be the better car. I still think Leclerc is better than Lando Norris. I still think he's better than Oscar Piastri, honestly. I think his talent is the second best in the grid. But when it comes to it, again, if that McLaren is just that much faster than what people are really putting on, it's going to be hard to catch up. Max Verstappen, again, easily the fastest driver in the grid, so that's why I have those 3 specifically ahead. Charles Leclerc, outstanding in qualifying. He's going to get a good amount of pole positions, especially if that Ferrari is the fastest car in this specific set of Grand Prix. There's talks about Ferrari sandbagging, but even then, even if they are sandbagging, again, that McLaren has just looked ridiculous. There seems to be no flaws with it. We'll see what happens as the races go along. There will definitely be some Grand Prix where the Ferrari is the better car, and I do think those two teams are going to be trading a lot of victories. But in that hand, I still think Charles Leclerc will be P4.
For sure.
All right. I'll go into my P3 here at this point. And you talked about him already. I'll get into it. It's Oscar Piastri. I think we're going to see the same championship battle that we saw last season between Max Verstappen, between Lando Norris. I still think Oscar Piastri is going to be a lot more involved. I actually don't think he's going to be that far off the other two drivers either. I think this could be a close championship between 4 or 5 drivers. We really don't know. And I think this is really going to be the point where any race can really change these standings anytime. So Oscar Piastri, I think he's an outstanding driver. I do think he can get a few wins in there this season, possibly outperform Lando Norris, but it is still going to be tough if Lando does go ahead in the championship and he is in a battle against Max Verstappen. They might take some points away from Oscar Piastri throughout the season. So it's going to be tough to tell, but that's where I have Oscar Piastri falling.
My P3 is Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, we spoke about, Lewis Hamilton and Leclerc. I do think they're neck and neck. I feel like they're going to, outperform each other all season long. I wouldn't be surprised if they're within, 20, 30 points at the end of the season. That's how close. Really, the whole top 5, I could see them swapping around, We all know the speed of these top 5. It's obviously these are the 5 best drivers on the grid, especially with the way the cars are. But like I said, I do have all the faith that Hamilton is going to figure it out in Ferrari. He's going to fix his qualifying issues, and he's going to try to make a push. I don't really think he'll be up there with Verstappen and Norris for the championship. I feel like they'll pull away, as the season progresses. But I do feel like Hamilton's going to get some wins in. And, he's going to look the best he has in years, in my opinion.
All right.
And then we got the final 2.
I think we should say the champion in this case instead of saying P2 first.
I agree.
I'll let you go first with the champion.
Obviously, it might be some bias, but I do have Lando Norris as the 2025 champion. He's got the best car on the grid. If the reports are correct, it's not even close. He has every opportunity to put it all together and make a push. Obviously, we know the reports on Red Bull. Verstappen's obviously coming in with the worst car to start the season. I feel like Norris can, if he can string 2 to 3 wins early, and Verstappen, struggles while Red Bull tries to figure this out, I do feel like Lando can take the lead and just keep it all season long. And this has got to be a season to do it. Obviously, there's a lot of talks about whether or not he has the capability of maintaining that pace all season long, not making those mistakes, especially on pole qualifying. We all know how he is with pole qualifying, but he is my champion for the 2025 season.
Okay. And I disagree. I'm going Max Verstappen. I think Max Verstappen's everyone knows my opinion. Well, not everyone who's watching, but I think Max Verstappen's the greatest driver of all time. I don't care if it's this early in his career to do what he's able to do. even with what isn't the fastest car in the grid. I don't care if this is the seventh fastest car in the grid. I'm still picking Max Verstappen to be the champion until he proves me otherwise. I get that McLaren is the fastest car, but when it comes to a close championship battle, if those two drivers are going to be around each other, it's like the aura of Max Verstappen trips Lando Norris out. And that's going to be a big thing throughout the season. That's going to hold Lando Norris back is can he overcome that? And I just don't think he really has it in him. I don't think he has the cutthroat nature in him that Max Verstappen does to win a championship. And that's why I personally think it's Max.
I mean, honestly, I don't hate it. I was swapping back and forth on these, but I do think the Red Bull's got to have I think they're the fourth best car in the grid. Looking at it, might change throughout the season, but I don't know if Verstappen does pull it off and he does win the drivers' championship this season. He is without a doubt the best F1 driver ever. If he can pull it off with the way this Red Bull is compared to that McLaren, it just seems like it's going to be an uphill battle all season for him. But if he does pull it off, there's no like it gets rid of all the talks about who it is. Like you have to say Verstappen at that point, right?
Yeah. I mean, and it depends how much he wins as well. Like, if there's rain races, he's going to be winning some Grand Prix. We've seen how it is like in Brazil. Brazil was just a fantastic display where people are scared to even challenge this guy. If he's dive bombing you, it's an overtake.
Yep.
The only person who's going to defend that move is Charles Leclerc, and we've seen it. But if Charles Leclerc isn't the one battling him for the championship, I just don't see anyone beating him. I think Charles Leclerc is the only one. Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton are the only ones who could beat him head-to-head in a championship, personally.
Well, I'm very glad we had some shake-up there in the top 5 with the way 6 through 10 went. It's about how I expected the grid to go. We have some very similar opinions on the back markers outside of 2 teams. But, yeah, this is pretty much how I expected our rankings to go. There wasn't really a surprise on your part for me. I don't know if there was any on my end, but we have talked about this before, so.
Yeah. I mean, I somewhat expected some of them, but some of them caught me off guard. Of course, both of us picking Lawson at P9 was definitely a shocker. But I think this would be a good time just to quickly run through the lists and kind of just give a quick refresher.
Yep.
So I'll start ahead quickly, and starting at P21, I have Hulkenberg, P20, Bortoleto, P19, Doohan, P18, Hajar, P17, Stroll, P16, Colapinto, P15, Sonoda, P14, Ocon, P13, Behrman, P12, Alonso, P11, Albon, P10, Gasly, P9, Lawson, P8, Sainz, P7, Antonelli, P6, Russell, P5, Hamilton, P4, Leclerc, P3, Piastri, P2, Norris, and P1, Verstappen. And you were like bobbing your head as I was going through my list, like I was singing a tune or something there. But it looked like you were just vibing out.
Nah, I'm just vibing right now, dude.
Yeah.
Mine, 21, Bortoleto. Colapinto. 20, Hulkenberg. 19, Bortoleto. 18, Ocon. 17, Doohan. 16, Beerman. 15, Stroll. 14, Hadjar. 13, Alonso. 12, Albon. 11, Sonoda. 10, Gasly. 9, Lawson. 8, Sainz. 7, Kimi. 6, Russell. 5, Piastri. 4, Leclerc. 3, Hamilton. 2, Verstappen. And 1, Lando Norris.
All right. Well, shout out Lando.
We are getting kind of late into it. We did expect this one to go a little bit longer than what we are going to keep these episodes into. But real quick, go ahead and name off your 5 constructor teams, your top 5 for constructor.
Top 5 for constructor. In P5, Williams. In P4, Mercedes. In P3, Red Bull. In P2, Ferrari. And in P1, McLaren.
So we're pretty much in the exact same boat, except for I have Williams P5, Red Bull P4, 3 Mercedes, 2 Ferrari, 1 McLaren.
All right. Fascinating.
Who's your podium for Australia?
Podium for Australia? That's a good question. I feel like Australia never has, like, the standard top drivers for the podium. So I guess for P1, I'm gonna say Piastri. For P2, give me George Russell, and for P3, I'm gonna go Lewis Hamilton.
Okay, okay. My P3 is Piastri. P2 I have Leclerc, and P1 I do have Lando Norris.
All right, all right. Well, it sounds good to me. Thank you to everyone who joined in for the first episode of Just Stuff. It was definitely fun, and we did talk about me and Jordan. So we didn't mention this at the beginning, but we do plan throughout the series to be bringing in guests here and there, and we're also going to be throwing in some things where, first off, if guests do want to participate in whatever that we are doing, whatever topic that we're doing in the podcast, we definitely want to do that type of stuff. We want to get people involved, but also we're going to be throwing in a bit of trivia in there as well. The trivia will be about F1 specifically, and we'll see. We'll see who's a true trivia champion. But I'm definitely excited to shoot some more episodes. So if anyone is interested to be in any episodes, definitely hit up myself or Jordan. Or
Absolutely.
JJ, shall I say.
Yeah, we can't wait to bring people on. This is something we've been talking about for a while, so I'm glad we're finally starting it. Yeah, it's going to be fun. You got anything else for us, Seb?
No, it's all good for me.
Thank you for everyone for tuning in to the first episode of Just Stuff, presented by Sports and Stuff. Thank you all for coming out and tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.
Have a great day.